Alrighty. Nick, Annie, hello. I'm your therapist, and I'm legit because I have glasses. Let's talk about some disagreements you've been having.
So you think I don't
feel
love you as much as you want me to love you?
Are showing her love.
Sometimes
What? Okay, so you.
I love you.
Oh,
I love
so
you
it's
too.
you that. Wait. Oh, so you're not showing enough.
Are you
oh,
sure?
need more than.
Yes.
Okay. You know what? They don't pay me enough for this, actually. No. What's going on, you guys? James here with another real recap and review for Love is Blind Season 9 in Denver. We're on week 3. Guys, we've come so far. Episodes 10 and 11 are what we're going to talk about today. And yes, spoilers are ahead. So if you haven't really watched anything, please go back and watch my other recaps and reviews. Save this to your watch later list and then come back and let me know. But for those who are sticking with me today, let me know in the comments below what you think of this week's episodes. Hit that subscribe button because, y'all, we just made it past 30,000 subscribers. Glory to God. And it's due in large part to your help. And like this video too, if you haven't already. But like I said, we're diving right into episodes 10 and 11 with weddings on the horizon. But before we get there, we got some drama to talk about. And if you thought I was joking with my intro about Nick and Annie, I really wasn't. So why don't we start there, y'all? Let's get right into the start of episode 10. And we're gonna, well, sort of be a fly on the wall with Annie and Nick, their conversation post-pod party. Now, if you remember, Annie drank a lot of alcohol. And Nick, well, he probably drank too, but Annie just can't hold her liquor, it seems like. After the pod reunion, they're back in their apartment, and Annie wants like some more kisses and trying to be affectionate. But listen, now I was gonna say she's so drunk, but no, she's so gone. And if you know, you know. Like, she is... Nick is trying to make some small talk and recap the evening, and then he mentions that Kate took the reasoning well. And I thought Annie would be like, well, I'm glad that's resolved. Forget about that. Let's just talk about us. No. Annie takes it a step further. Mamma mia. You know what Annie says? What she said back in Cabo and what she said already to this man, she put words into his mouth. I'm not a Nick fan, as you know, so far this season, but oh boy, is Annie doing this thing again. She said, and I quote, "You don't love me as much as I love you." And Nick has said, "Are you for real?" That's basically the face he gave without the words. Annie said, "I'm just not so sure about us." So yeah, she's definitely drunk with a capital D. Because then she turns around and says, "I love you so much, and I want you to be here with me like I am with you." And Nick said, "I'm standing in the kitchen. I'm in front of you. What? Do you and Joe drink from the same bottle? What's going on?" So then there's a pause, and Annie asks, "Well, are you sure you're here with me?"
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
At this point, I know Nick is like, all right, let me get this Uber and get out of here, because Annie continues to go in circles. I mean, to her, it's probably like a squiggly line, but circles. This is like the worst game of ping pong I've ever witnessed, because Annie said, "I want you to be here with me." And Nick continues to reaffirm her and say, "I'm here for you and with you." And then at one point, Nick got fed all the way up. And this man said, "I'm going to finish my food." Actually, no, he didn't even say that. He said, "I'm just here trying to eat my chalupa." Oh my gosh. I mean, he had enough time to think about naming the food he's eating. That's how mad he is. And he said, "I'm trying to eat my chalupa and enjoy the night." And at this point, I have it in my notes. I said, at this point, they are done. And boy, are they ever. But we're not there yet. Let's move on to the next couple's check-in, now that we're, of course, still in Denver. And we have Allie and Anton having a very serious conversation about Anton's alcohol consumption, which Anton's trying to reassure Allie is not so serious after all. But what I find very ironic about this entire lead up to the conversation is Allie asks Anton for a drink, yet she's concerned that he drinks after his shifts. Remember, he does a overnight shift just like Allie, but when he gets home, he has like 2 or 3 beers apparently, which is kind of concerning. It's a little early, but he is saying, "I'm fine." Yeah, I don't know. The thing is, how can she sit there and be so concerned about his alcohol consumption? And she was just like, "What bottle we popping today?" You know, you can't have it both ways. I don't know. Apparently, Anton reveals that Patrick came to their apartment complex. He went downstairs and brought a couple of drinks with him. But Allie said, "Baby, we got like a 12-pack that's missing." And he's like, don't worry, I'm Russian. Come on. But Ali seems actually pretty darn concerned about his drinking because they continue to have the conversation. I think it's legitimate. But again, you can't encourage the behavior by asking for a drink of your own. I know that's been stuck in my head. But Anton is asking, okay, so my normal workday involves coming home and having a couple of drinks, but your normal work week, what does it entail for you? Not doing laundry and not cleaning up after yourself? So he's trying to dig at her a little, and Ali said, actually, yes, that is a normal workday for me. I don't even want to think about cleaning. And Anton said, my goodness, really? So just when Anton thought he had a gotcha moment, Ali said, okay, hold on, we're not done with this conversation though. She said there was half a bottle of tequila left in the fridge, and Anton says, it's not there anymore. And she's thinking, what happened? Where did it go? And he's like, in my belly. I'm going to be honest. That's probably the most concerning part of the conversation because half a bottle of tequila and it is gone. Brother, did your buddy Joseph come over the house too? What happened? So Anton is really getting on the defensive here and says, listen, you drink, I drink, we drink, he, she, me drink. He doesn't say all that, but you know what he's getting at. He's like, hey, we both are drinking, so what's the issue here? And she's like, yeah, but you drink more than me. And he's kind of caught between a rock and a hard place. He doesn't want to curse her out, but he also wants to stick up for himself. But Anton said, listen, all right, I just need you to just continue to be real and genuine with me. He's trying to spin this around, and Ali, is a little upset, I guess. So Anton realizes that and says something I didn't expect him to say, which is, if you don't want to marry me, I'll respect that decision. That came out of left field. What's going on here? So we're going from booze to Big Macs. Well, sort of. Now it's time for Megan to meet Jordan's parents. And the reason I even had that transition right there was because Jordan's dad said, as they're looking at the menu, hey, Jordan's probably looking for a Whopper or a Big Mac. Ain't that right, honey? He's cheap. That's essentially what Jordan's dad said. I'm not calling Jordan cheap. I mean, Jordan's dad said it, but dang. And as they're having some casual conversation, Jordan's mom reveals that she doesn't even like Jordan's big chicken smoothies. She says something to the effect of, you're still drinking those things? And hey, all of America's wondering, Jordan, why you even started drinking those things. But Jordan said that he's actually talking to a doctor now about reversing his vasectomy so him and Megan can try to have kids once they're married. And, Jordan's parents are happy about that. Megan's, I'm sure, happy about that. But then the parents ask, are you guys all in it together 110%? Jordan says, absolutely, yes, it's my person. Megan said it would take something catastrophic for them to be unsure about getting married. It's not that a catastrophic thing happens this week, but something does happen this week that will definitely make them unsure about getting married. The conversation ends, and Jordan's parents give them their blessing. Jordan's going to celebrate by heading to Mickey D's. Kidding. But all jokes aside, let's get into a conversation between Kalybriah and Edmond, and surprisingly in this scene, they are not on roller skates. Kalybriah brings up the pod party comment that Edmond made. Remember last week when we talked about their whole tiff at the pod party where Edmond's like, ha, Annie, I wish someone would say I'm perfect. And then Kalybriah said, what? You said what? And Edmond was not in a good place. If there was a dog house, he's in the dog mansion at this point. My goodness. Edmond tries to defend himself and say, listen, when I said it, it was just a joke. And Kalybriah was not buying it. And she said the reason she's not buying it is because the day of the party, she was asking Edmond for help. And Edmond refused to help because I guess he didn't want to be late to the party or something like that. So Kalybriah is running around getting her hair and her nails done. And I know that takes a long time. Okay, the least Edmond can do is get her fed, but guess what? Edmond let her become hangry, and you never do that. So Kalybriah said, I was hungry, I didn't even eat. You didn't even try to help me. But hey, Edmond wants to be punctual, I guess. And she brings up, I needed bandanas and stuff for us both, and you couldn't even run to Ross. Edmond, you couldn't even run to Ross? I mean, granted, you're going to be waiting in line for 40 minutes, but you couldn't run to Ross? So Kalybriah is in the middle of venting to Edmond about how she doesn't feel heard, and Kalybriah said something that I thought might have been a little offensive. I don't know. Let me know in the comments if this was offensive. But Kalybriah said, Edmond, you're not slow. You're very smart. And I thought, who said he was slow? Except for there are people in the comments that have said that, but who said that? So really, Kalybria's upset that Edmond didn't acknowledge her feelings. And on one hand, I get Kalybria's frustration with him. But on the other hand, if she didn't want this to be like a big thing in front of the other people, because she was explaining how she didn't like the eyes that were on her from the other podmates, then maybe Kalybria, you should have like taken Edmond off to the side and then shoot him out in terms of like arguing and stuff like that, so that other people wouldn't really see. Or maybe like take him outside of the actual establishment and say like, I didn't like that comment you made, but she chose to address it in front of everyone else. So I'm like, what do we got over here? An argument in front of people that was probably not brought on by Edmond. He instigated, but like she decided to have the conversation in front of the other people too. So I think they both hold some accountability for being wrong. Edmond eventually apologizes again for making the comment at the pod party, and Kalybriah said she doesn't like his apologies. She says that he does this thing where he laughs, and she's like, who's laughing? Who's funny? What am I, a clown? So it's a reference to the Goodfellas film. You should watch it. It's great. But he's laughing nervously, I think, and that might be like a tick for him, but she doesn't like that. So she said, I don't appreciate when you apologize and laugh. So yeah, they're not communicating well. Edmond says, listen, I'll hold myself accountable. And Kalybriah said, all right, let me apologize for getting heated. And I thought, finally, both of them are apologizing to each other. That's pretty nice. So the conversation ends on what I thought was a mature no. So now it's time for Oh No Joe to meet Madison's family. And you're wondering, who gave him that nickname? Me. Because Joe gave me a lot of oh no moments this week in Love is Blind. Let's start with this family meeting. They're both sitting waiting for Madison's parents to show up, and Madison said, I just want to jump your bones, Joe, in the middle of this restaurant. I'm thinking, Madison, what in the world? And Joe replies, we're eating dinner. So that was one of the awkward moments. And then Madison's family shows up and they all talk, they hug, they're laughing, and they want to see Madison's ring. And Madison's family says that ring is so sparkly and sparkly is so you. And I just know Megan's in the corner on the phone with her attorney who she's got on retainer and thinking, sue them right now. Sue them. Madison's sister gets way ahead of herself and at one point in the conversation says, you guys are so cute together and I can't wait for the babies. Plural. Babies, plural. And Joe's face, in my opinion, was hilarious in this moment. That man does not want Madison. I mean, it is clear that he does not want this girl. Then they ask Joe, what have you learned about Madison that you love? And Joe says, well, I learned that she's crazy. Okay. He says more than that. He says she's crazy in the best way possible. I just don't know how that is a compliment. That's like a backhanded compliment. And I think Madison felt that in the moment too. But yeah, he basically said, this girl is nuts. And then I was waiting for the, but I love her part. That never came. And then throughout the conversation, these slow zoom-ins on Joe's face, they were sending me. But honestly, the entire conversation felt like they were trying to convince Joe to marry Madison. And at one point, it was so apparent because Madison's sister says, my sister's husband, my brother-in-law. I'm like, calm down. Calm down. He doesn't even love her. And I don't know why I sounded like Mark Wahlberg there, but anyway, guys, Joe's definitely going to break all of our hearts. Well, their hearts. Not ours. I mean, America knows that Joe wants to leave. He wanted to leave the minute he saw her in Mexico. Come on. Alrighty, so next up is Megan meeting Luca. And there's a movie night at Jordan's apartment that we don't see any footage of because Megan reveals this in a testimonial video. She does like a little selfie video. I think that we all knew that Luca was never going to be shown on Love is Blind this season. But Megan, had this meeting. And I'm like, oh, I'm curious. And, we'll learn more about the meeting in just a little bit. But before that, we got to get to Allie meeting Anton's mom. And Anton's mom said, hey, Anton has matured over the past 2 years. And I know the whole time Allie's just sipping on her mimosa thinking like, has he? Is he mature? Because Allie this whole week, both episodes this week, she's doubting Anton entirely. But in a rare moment of accountability, Allie admits that she's not as responsible as she could be. And Anton says, I appreciate when you're willing to admit your faults. And I'm thinking, it's getting hot in here. There's a little fire in the kitchen. And Anton says, Mom, we're both willing to pick up the slack. And this is when Allie begins with her little comments. And she says, well, so far.
What do you mean by that?
And throughout this whole meeting, it seemed like they were having like a lunch or a brunch or something. And the camera kept just showing Anton eating and eating. And another shot of him eating. And I'm thinking, why? And then I thought about it again. I think I know why, guys. Anton's really nervous, so they're trying to maybe show the viewer that he's nervous by like eating and stuffing his face. But it came off weird. It's a weird edit. And that's where it really ends for this meeting. I don't know. It was just odd to me. So let's get into another odd conversation. And it just so happens to be, ladies and gentlemen, the final conversation between Annie and Nick. Wow. Annie admits, hey, I was drunk and I was not acting right. And the whole time Nick is thinking, yeah, I could have told you that. I actually might have told you that and you just weren't listening. But like, how many times is this going to happen where Annie just gets wasted and then goes and tells Nick, but you don't love me like I love you. And Nick is saying, I love you. And she's like, yeah, but do you? And it's just annoying. So Annie, in the middle of her apologizing, gets not cut off by Nick, but Nick changes the subject quick. He says, you know, Annie, getting to the altar is just not a happy idea for me. Brother, where did this come from? Oh, but he's not done. Annie said that she wants to get married to Nick and she still loves him. But Nick said the wedding isn't what I want to do. And Annie's like, shh, my sweet child, be quiet. You don't have to tell me yes or no right now. And Nick is saying, Annie, I'm not even saying yes or no right now. I'm just telling you I'm packing my bags. But it's not registering, you know? Annie's not clocking that up here. So Nick makes it as plain as that baked chicken Jordan was eating and says, I can't go on any longer. Nick reveals that his breaking point was Annie continuing to put words into his mouth after he asked her, hey, don't do that again. And she agreed, but then she did it again. So Annie is really pleading with him to stay, and Nick said, listen, if we get to that altar, I'm saying no. And then Annie gives us her best impression of like her Joker laugh because she starts laughing in the middle of all this, but it sounds like she's either going to fight Nick or she's going to fall on the ground and then cry. I don't know, one of the two. And then he tries to drop a bar and tells Annie, you can't make 1 + 1 = 3. And Annie said, watch me. And now I'm thinking, this is dangerous rhetoric here. Annie just wants to control Nick, have a husband to say she has a husband, I think, but they don't work well together. No. And then Nick asks her, hey, Annie, how can your love be so deep for me, but at the same time so shallow? And that's when Annie probably flipped a switch and thought, oh, okay, no more begging for you. I'm going on the offense. She takes out her phone and says, let me text my friend. And thanks to the producers, we see a partial conversation through iMessage. So Annie starts texting, right? So we see a little bit of the text thread. Annie says, hi, 90% sure no wedding. And this unknown mystery recipient, because they blurred out the name, says, hi, checking in on you. Why? So extra wise. Annie says, I'll call you later. And this person says, okay. And Annie said, currently filming. Nick won't do. And then they cut away from it. I want to know who she was texting. And then Annie again tries to go on offense and says she doesn't want to waste her time saying she loves him, but he loves her less. Now, Annie, listen here. You can try to spin the narrative, but we got the footage. You're caught in 4K, okay? You have constantly tried to get affirmation from Nick, and Nick has affirmed you, but you keep saying he's not. Not supporting Nick in any way here, but if there's a right and a wrong, I think Nick probably wins this argument. Then before Nick leaves, Annie says, you'll regret this. And Nick said, you can't force me to get to the altar. And that's when Annie said, I can't force somebody? Things are out of my control? And then she just goes like Hulk on him. So it's just the arguing, it gets crazy, and eventually Nick just leaves and says, deuces, I'm going to the mountains, bro. So yeah, they are officially broken up. So there you go. Annie and Nick, they're done. Let's move on now to another couple who might not make it. Kalybriah and Edmond. So it's 8 days until the weddings, and they're getting their marriage license registered, and oh my gosh, it is so cool, except for the fact that I'm distracted by Edmond's shirt. Not only is it loud, but my goodness, where is he going? To the Florida Keys? Like, bro, where are you just going to go sip on some pina coladas in Isla Morada? Did that rhyme? So after that, we get a 7 days until weddings title card, and you know what time it is, Love is Blind fam. Time to go shopping for some wedding dresses and tuxedos. It was an interesting segment. So let's start with the wedding dress shopping. Vanessa Lachey is there wearing I don't know what, and the girls are dragging Nick apparently for not fighting to stay with Annie. Not only do they hate that man, but boy do they love them some Annie. So Megan ends up bringing her sister and her best friend Jeremy. And at first I thought, does Jordan know? And then it registered and it clicked. Okay, I get it. Megan reveals that the time with Luca was a lot and will take some getting used to, but that he's adorable. That doesn't sound great. I don't know. That sounds like she's a little overwhelmed. We'll find out more in a little bit. But then Kalybriah, they go to her and Kalybriah's friend. They interview her a little bit and ask her, what do you think about Edmond? And she says, Edmond is different, but I think he'll be good for her. Did I mention that he's different? And then Ali's mom is there. I don't know if she still lives in Brazil, but she's definitely Brazilian. I could recognize a Portuguese accent anywhere. Ali's mom said that she met her husband via the internet and they didn't see each other for 3 years, so of course she appreciates the Love is Blind social experiment. And Ali's mom seems sweet for all intents and purposes. So Ali, being as nervous as she is the first one to try on her dresses. So she comes out in the very first dress, and I thought it looked nice, honestly. I liked the train, but Ali doesn't like the first choice. I don't know what you guys think, but she comes out in a second dress, and I think it might be better because it's not as sparkly. But then what I think hurts the dress is this like slit in the dress. I mean, even though Kalybriah is like gassing her up and saying like, yeah, girl, it looks good. Yeah, I don't like the slit too much. Even Ali's mom was like, yeah, we'll just cover that up if you're going to go with this dress. So we'll see what final dress she chooses. Kalybriah is the next out, and the very first dress she wears is not that great. I don't know. It just didn't really like work for her. I'm pretty sure there was another dress in there that was better. But she said when she put the veil on for the first dress, she said, I look like a virgin. What? So then she goes back, tries on a second dress, and comes out, and I do think her second choice is much better. Even though there's like a lot of floof at the bottom of the dress, I don't know. The top half is nice, so she did a good job picking her second dress. And Madison, meanwhile, is crying for KB. Like, she stays crying for KB. I didn't think, like, why are you crying for Kalybriah so much? But I guess the girls stick together. So Megan is the next one out, and her first dress is okay. I don't know. It was like just okay. There could be a better choice in there, which is why all of them went with their second choices. But I don't know. The second choice didn't even seem that much different from the first choice, other than the floof in the bottom half. A lot of floof in these dresses. But the second dress is fine. It's sparkly. She's Sparkle Megan, so, you know. Then Madison comes out last, and she picks a very simplistic first dress. Now, her reasoning for picking a second dress, I was like, huh? She said, I just want a dress that's more sexy. You do know it's a wedding. The second dress that she comes out in is exactly the same, and I thought immediately of the Spider-Man meme. Like, you know, the one where they point at each other? Like, what in the world? How is that any different from the first one? Maybe I'm wrong. Let me know in the comments if I'm wrong. But her second dress is still very straightforward, so I ain't gonna lie to y'all. None of the dresses were great this season. They all didn't look great. Maybe I'm being a little bit critical, but they weren't the worst either. Alrighty, let's get into the tuxedo shopping moment where Jordan says Megan and Luca are like one. That's not what Megan thinks. I don't know. Maybe that's what she thinks. She just didn't sound like she was so sure in the wedding dress moment, but Jordan seems pretty happy. Edmond, well, he brings his friend, and Edmond's friend said that, well, he can't wait for Edmond to say yes at the altar. Anton brings a friend as well, but it wasn't Joseph. Thank God. You know that Joseph dude is trouble. But then we go to Joe, and Joe said, yeah, you know, it's definitely a time. And Nick Lachey asked him to elaborate. And Joe said, oh, well, you know, half of me is elated, and the other half wants to jump out of the window. Yeah. Oh, nah. No one else is laughing? Joe's friend then says, well, everyone knows that Joe's a bro. I don't know what that means, but I know that that can't be good. So yeah, let's just say it. I'm going to get it out of the way right now. Joe is not comfortable, okay? All right, we'll come back to him. Anton reveals to his mom and friend that they're working through some issues right now. And Anton's friend said, hey, clock in, bro. Just get out of your head. And this man is actually giving him some words of encouragement, and Anton seems really receptive. So I'm like, a mature moment. Interesting. Edmond then comes out without a dress shirt on and only has the blazer and vest on. And if he could, he would go like that to his wedding. And I know Kalybriah would just immediately walk down the other way and say, I'm not marrying you like this. But then he gets back in the closet, comes back out with a pink dress shirt on and a messed up collar and tie. Can he be serious for like one moment, please? Man. Alrighty. Then Jordan comes out and his suit is velvet? He makes this weird Willy Wonka comment. Don't know why he made that, but I don't know. I'm not loving anything in their segment either. None of the tuxedos or suits look good. What is happening this season in Love is Blind? What's in the water again in Denver? So now is where we're going to hone in on Joe, because while Joe's trying on his suits, he just doesn't know what he wants. And while he finds one that he says he likes, he's not confident at all. He doesn't even know how to tie a tie, and I'm not downing him for this, but man, I wish he had someone to teach him how to tie his tie. You're never too old to learn, I guess. But he's trying to tie his tie, and his friend said, can I help you? He's like, I got it, bro. Leave me alone. As he's probably sweating profusely under his shirt. And then he gets frustrated, takes the tie off, and says, yeah, this is good. And then the fitting person says, would you like to try on the pants? And he said, I don't even want to wear pants right now. And he goes in the closet, closes the door, and I'm pretty sure he's probably crying or frustrated or both. Because as he leaves, he literally leaves. Like, he dips out of the tuxedo fitting. He gets in his truck, and he just bails, you guys. And before he did that, of course, he told his friends to shut up, which was not very nice. So Joe is stressed right now. And he reveals in his testimonial interview that not only is he stressed, but he doesn't even know what he wants to do anymore. So I think he's totally saying no at the altar at this point. Boy, was I wrong. So now it's time to get into episode 11, and we're going to start with a date that Megan and Jordan go on. And immediately when the episode started and I saw their dating location, I rebuked it in Jesus' name. I said, what house of manifestations? Oh, hold on. And then when they get in there, there's this lady who is like, are you spiritual? And Jordan's like, I don't really know. Am I? And she's like, well, are you into my spirits? And I'm like, ugh. I'm like, go away. Get thee behind me, Satan. Like, what is this? And then they show the tarot cards, and I'm like, okay. Megan seems into it. Jordan doesn't. I don't know. I don't know. So now it's time for another final conversation, this time between Joe and Madison. Madison's on the floor, on the phone with somebody, and says, Joe's gone. He just left. And then it's a weird cut to Joe, like, entering the apartment, and he's like, it sounds like he's been there for a little while, but Madison clearly doesn't know that. So when she goes to the kitchen and Joe is there, well, they have a conversation, and it ends up being their last. Joe told Madison, I'm not your person. And honestly, we all could have told you that, bro. He tells Madison, I would have told you no at the altar. And this entire time, Madison is crying and asking, what changed? And Joe's not giving an answer. So Joe officially breaks up with Madison, and Joe said, this is just not right. But Madison said, I need a reason from you. And he's still not budging at this point. Oh boy. Joe reveals, listen, the physical worked for me, but everything else, I couldn't do it. And he said as much to her in Mexico. So I don't know. And then Joe says something that was more of a diss than anything, I think. He said, we got a lot further than we would have if we dated in the real world. That hurts, bro. That's really harsh, dude. My goodness gracious. At this point, Madison's just a blubbering mess. She is not happy. And Madison says, I can see you don't care because if you did, you would have hugged me. And Joe said, I can hug you if you'd like. And she said, no. I mean, bro, you have like no compassion right now? Just you're dumping your fiance, not giving her a reason, and then telling her, hey, I don't think we would have really worked in the real world. Ooh, my goodness. And in his testimonial interview, Joe says, I feel relieved. Hey, yo, you feel relieved? Madison doesn't. Goodness, this man wanted to be out of this relationship 2 weeks ago. And in that same testimonial interview, Joe was not mincing his words. He said she wasn't going to be the person to fit his mold of someone he could do life with, spend the rest of his life with, and be happy. When Madison watches this back at the reunion, oh, it ain't gonna be pretty. I'll tell you that much. So Joe does this like one arm sort of non-committal hug, and Madison then hugs him fully, and you can tell he's trying to pull away at one point, but Madison continues to stay with the hug, so he's just trying to make the best of it. And then he leaves, and he was out of there so fast, like with the quickness. That man was gone. And then Madison was left alone crying on the kitchen floor, which was kind of sad. So that's 2 couples down and a few more to go, I guess. Jordan and Megan, Kalybriah and Edmond, and Allie and Anton. Oh boy, these couples are dropping like flies. We've got Kalybriah and Edmond going on a snowbike date, and Edmond's not driving, and he's having a blast in the passenger seat. Kalybriah's operating this motor vehicle, and I don't know, maybe she just couldn't trust him to do something like this. And then they get to the top of the mountain, and Edmond's doing his best Highlander pose. He's like, yes, it's beautiful. And Kalybriah goes to get hot chocolate, but when she comes back, as she goes to sit with him, he's not even helping her down, and she didn't like that. He didn't even offer to get hot chocolate. And let me tell you guys, this was the start of it. Apparently in the car ride over, Kalybriah reveals that when the cameras were off, he was acting weird with her. And then when the cameras came on, he's acting different. So she's calling him out on acting brand new. And the thing is, I get why she would be upset. A lot of stuff must have happened behind the scenes because this was abrupt. She says, Edmond, you're not the same person that you are when the cameras are on. And then she said, I hate that I have to continue to address the elephant in the room. She said that twice this week, if you're keeping count. Kalybriah said, Edmond, you just didn't want to communicate with me, and they didn't communicate well in the car ride before the date. So a lot of this comes down to communication, maybe. And then she starts crying, and she said, I can't force you to grow up. And I'm going to be honest, that hot chocolate is cold chocolate now. Edmond said he didn't do anything wrong and says, well, sorry that you feel that way. And Edmond is like, I'm not going to apologize to you right now because I know I'm not wrong, but I apologize. But not really. Kalybriah said that she's only here with him now because she's basically swallowing her pride. And I thought that was a little interesting. So he's upset. And he just gives her the cold shoulder. And then she called him out his name. And I thought, excuse me? You called him what? She called him the B word. And it wasn't Buddy. So they're cutting each other off, and eventually Edmond just totally disassociates, and I don't think anyone's getting to the altar at this point except for Jordan and Megan. But before we get to Jordan and Megan's next date, we got to talk about Anton meeting Allie's mom. And again, this was really nothing of note, to be honest, but Anton showed up a little late. Maybe he was working or something. But Allie's mom is talking with Allie about one of Allie's sisters, not approving of them. But once Anton gets there, Allie's mom says, I give you guys my support, my blessing, Ichi amo. That means I love you in Portuguese. But yeah, it seemed kind of like a sweet ending, even though, I don't know, Allie just seems like not happy with Anton. There's something there. Okay, so now it's time for Jordan and Megan's date, and they're getting custom Western themed cowboy and cowgirl hats. They want to wear them as they walk up to the changing rooms, and Megan's, of course, got some sparkles on her hat. And then Megan, as they sit down and have a conversation, she reveals that they looked at another house, but it just wasn't right for them. And Jordan said in many words, I think we'll find the right house for us, and I'll be there for it. Basically, like, don't choose anything. Nothing in the 1.5 to 2 range. And Megan then reveals she picks homes based on home numerology. That's that like spiritual stuff where it's like these numbers add up and it means something. It means prosperity. It means health. Oh, please. Jordan is me in that moment where he's like, you're going to make or break a decision on a home because of numbers? No, please. And lastly, Megan reveals that her favorite thing about Jordan is him being a dad, but her least favorite thing about Jordan is sometimes he's quiet and not super talkative. Keep that one here in the dome, you know what I mean? I want y'all to remember that because it's going to come up later this episode. Alrighty, let's get to Edmond and Kalybriah. And Edmond comes home and guess he picked up some flowers to apologize to Kalybriah. He said, I'm sorry I ignored you. I don't want to lose you. And Kalybriah said, oh, okay. Well, there was a moment though I wanted to throw my ring off on the side of the mountain. Well, that's not great. Wow. She said, I'm still contemplating whether or not I want to be with you, but what you did was so manly. And thank you for apologizing to me, hearing me out, and bringing me flowers, and not sitting on the couch, texting, and ignoring me. I'm like, this is oddly specific. And then KB apologizes for cursing out Edmond on the mountain and said, I'm not that person, and I haven't been that person in years. Well, guess you were that person a few days ago, or even just a day ago. Not great. And now it's time to go and check in on Anton and Allie, and they're having a horse carriage date in the freezing cold mountains of Colorado. They even got Anton doing testimonial interviews in ankle-deep snow, and I know that man is hating his life right now. He must be thinking, you got me out here trying to tell you how much I love Allie with a gold chalice in my hand, and I can't feel my toes? But while they're on this horse carriage ride, Allie's throwing in these weird comments. Anton says, don't break my heart, and Allie says, what heart? What do you mean by that? Because Anton said, I can't have a heart? But really. And then where they're by the fireplace, Anton says, hopefully after we get married, we'll both change for the better. And she says, or change for the worse. Like, girl, what are you implying? Allie's saying no at the altar. I don't know. And then we get another little date with Kalybriah and Edmond, and they're going roller skating. He's doing his little moves, a little hop, skip, and a jump. And before they both go out and skate, he kisses Kalybriah's feet as she puts them into the roller skate. Edmond, I don't know if anyone's ever told you, but you like feet. And as they're skating and having a blast, the producers decide to use some money on Don't Go Breaking My Heart by Elton John while they're skating. And trust me, the producers definitely had a transition in mind, because they go into Megan and Jordan in the apartment as they're about to have a disagreement, and Jordan's on his phone and he's listening to Don't Go Breaking My Heart. So they're doing this like trick in film and TV where it's like non-diegetic sounds become diegetic sounds. Stuff you hear in the world of the film or the TV show. I thought that was probably the most creative thing they've done all season. But I digress. Megan is frustrated with Jordan since he's not being conversational, and Jordan just doesn't know what to say to her. Jordan said, you're asking me to give you more, but it's abrasive. I'm tired. I work. Luca, I'm tired. And she's like, okay, I know, but I also do a lot too. I play tennis with my friends. I go to Aspen with my friends. We have happy hour. I like nice restaurants. And then I go to LA. Whoa, what a life. At least that's what Jordan's probably thinking. Jordan ultimately said, I just need you to be more compassionate towards me, and says that, listen, I don't talk to you about work because I don't want to project my stresses onto you. And in this instance, I think I get what he's saying, but Megan is trying to get any bit of conversation out of him. So she's like, no, tell me how much you hate Janice at reception. And he just won't do it. And in the middle of Megan saying, okay, I hear you, Jordan says, I don't think you do. So at this point, I think Jordan's getting a little cold feet. He said that his speed right now is Lego and Luca, and you need to be there with me. And Megan is like, yeah, but like, and then the music starts playing and you know what they're implying. But then Jordan says one more thing before the segment ends and then the episode ends. He says, I don't know how to feel right now. I mean, I don't want you to think with me you're taking a step down in a social class just to be with me. Bruh, who said that? Nobody's saying that. But these are Jordan's insecurities, I think, coming out to play, because remember last week, he said that it feels like he might be mooching off of her if they get an expensive house, even though she's willing to sell her LA home to find a home for him, her, and Luca. So, I don't know. I think Jordan and Megan, there's some trouble in paradise here, okay? There's been trouble in paradise all season. And then the episode ends on a cliffhanger. We get no tease to a wedding, and we get nothing about weddings in general. So next week, episode 12, the finale will be all about weddings, and it's gonna be crazy. So I need y'all to lock in and stay with me. So hit the big red button below and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out. Tap on those bell notifications, like this video, and let me know in the comments below, after week 3, now that we've talked all about it, which couple is most likely to get married and which one is least likely to get married. Alrighty, y'all. Well, there you have it. Thanks so much for tuning in and sticking with me as we recapped episodes 10 and 11 of Love is Blind Season 9. I'm excited for next week. Who gets married and who doesn't? Only time will tell. I don't think anyone's getting married. That's just me. Alrighty, y'all. Well, again, thanks so much for watching. God bless you guys, and I'll catch you at the next screening.